I want to make you a classical scholar. In this lesson, I can do that by taking you to a few Roman cities frozen in time. I first walked into Pompeii April 1st, 1989. I found my journal entry. It blew me away. Pompeii was the most fascinating ancient place I'd ever stood, with the fine homes, fancy baths, the theaters. But what really got me was the window into the real lifestyle, seeing regular people in a snapshot of the year AD 79. And that might just be the spark that made me turn to classical history. The surprise was that Roman life looks a lot like ours. Advanced society with so many comforts, the same human heart, with a few major differences. The time period, it's the Pax Romana, the golden age of Rome. Rome has defeated their enemies to give citizens a life with trade and comfort and opulence, luxury, slavery, and idol worship. I want to take you inside the homes of the men and women who lived this life. Let's visit Pompeii and Ephesus, frozen in time. I'm Mr. Hull. This is Ancient History. Welcome to Classical Kingdoms, where history reveals truth and wisdom for your journey. We take the classical approach to history, grounded in what actually matters, like the daily life of ordinary Roman people, Roman culture. And I want to hand you a mirror moment in this lesson, a reflection of the past that's worth comparing to our lives of today. We are just like the Romans were, with some exceptions. We can see it in the civilization snapshot. Roman culture frozen in AD 79. And this lesson shows you ordinary Roman life, their homes, their food, their gods, their games, and the slaves who helped run it all. Now in this lesson, let's walk the streets of Pompeii and Ephesus and learn the culture and notice the cultural collision. Let's begin. Let's walk the streets into some very spectacular Roman villas, wealthy homes like the House of the Vettii. We're on the outskirts of town now. The House of the Vettii, it's owned by two men. And the twist is that these men were not born rich. They were liberti, that's freedmen. They had been slaves. They were gifted or purchased their way out of slavery, but were successful merchants. They had built a fortune. An earthquake in AD 62 cracked their house, and so as they rebuilt it, check out the beauty of this house, the atrium, the columns. It's really an atrium designed to make you say, wow. In fact, all the walls are too. But marble statues and splashing water in the garden. Are you impressed, right? Do you like fancy homes like this? Have you walked through a home with maybe some of this Roman architectural style, a very classical style, worth checking out? And I believe you'll appreciate Pompeii so much more when you do visit, knowing this history. So click the subscribe button too. All of these lessons stitch together. I like the House of the Vettii. I like all of these. Beyond the colonnades, beyond the atrium, these walls are painted with a paint on wet plaster. What is that called? A fresco, like the word fresh plaster. The colors are going to stay. These are 2,000 years old, these walls, and they add depth and dimension. They have perspective. They have opulence, right? This is a wealthy family, a wealthy home, and really brilliant colors. I'm always amazed at the red, how it is able to stay so red through these rooms. Now, the House of the Vettii would have slave quarters like all of them, and it's really famous for this graffiti. Eutychus, a Greek woman, this graffiti is essentially an advertisement, a prostitution advertisement that they were running straight out of their home, saying that she has good manners, she's not going to give you a hard time. but it is an interesting contrast, and that is the culture that we're dealing with. But on a lighter note, I really like this scene of Cupids doing laundry. So laundry was a thing here. They had fullery rooms, Pholonica. They had containers, clay pots that we could still see. They were storing urine that, helps keep the clothes clean. They have these pots that were found in this Pholonica of Stephanus, boiling water, and they were the same kinds of pots. I mean, look, 2,000 years old. It's pretty amazing. Another villa. This is spectacular. The geometry, the 3 dimensions of it. The art teacher in me, if you look at this cubiculum, like the word cubicle, this was a little bedroom with incredible art, but it's 3D, right? And look at the math on this scene, this wall, because you're going to have to wait until the Renaissance before we're going to see this again. And that is why the Renaissance is called a rebirth back to classical age, back to Greek and Roman times. But it never ceases to amaze me, the level of detail and beauty. They appreciate the beauty in Pompeii and all over the Roman. This is the Roman lifestyle, and they can afford it. Well, shift to food, because these wall paintings are going to include bowls of fruit. Or how about the pizza? That is a scene of pizza bread. You can see the round disc of pita. The word pizza comes from pita. And this one had the cheese spread on it with fruit or whatever, but that is the original pizza. And this is a good scene. The man is wearing a white magistrate toga. He could be a senator, a local magistrate. He's either handing out the bread or he's selling it. And we can just see how the bread is scored. It's divided into sections so that you can break bread without needing a knife to do that. What about this depiction of a comic actor and a lyre player? Vine leaf gardens. This is just celebrating entertainment. The wall paintings are what they have. They don't have, what do you have? Devices, phones. But my number one thing are these mosaics. Whenever these mosaics, I am amazed that they are in such great shape after 2,000 years. This one is saying, beware of the dog. Cave Canon. I think, beware of the dog. You need more than a dog to protect your home. You need the shrines filled with these pagan gods. It's Roman religion. Did you notice? Sometimes they're just painted flat, or sometimes they're an actual structure. This is the Lararium. You're going to put your little god statues here. Lots and lots of them. Roman religion. We talked, if you're coming from Lesson 57, the Imperial cult is the one big political statement you're making in public. But inside your home, dozens, if not hundreds, of these very particular gods, these little statues. You'll notice these now maybe in museums. There's lots of popular ones. You need the pantry god, Penates, the Penates, the gods of the pantry. You need the genius, the guiding spirits of the father of the house. Maybe the wine pouring one is the most important. Lares, you can see his gesture. He is holding up a horn. He is pouring it into the mixing disc. With these clay amphora storing wine, the wine kind of gets concentrated. So you always mixed it first, and the Romans like to mix it with honey, water. It kind of made a drink that was festive. It's libations, and that's what the Lares god is helping protect your home and make sure things are running well. And you may notice these amphora don't even have flat bottoms. Some do, but the ones that are pointed, it's making it easier for the slave to grab it and pour it. It also makes it easier to store them on the ships, pack more of them in. every single day. The family, the slaves pouring out wine, laying out fruit. You needed to burn incense in your Lararium. So with worship and Roman religion, pagan gods at all levels of the kitchen, the corner fountain, you're a slave, how do you opt out? Keep that question in mind, knowing that there are monotheistic Jews and Christians in Pompeii, especially after the year 70, after Lesson 61. Moving out onto the street, there are a lot of these thermopolium. That's your hot food stall. It looks like a place that you would go through the line and they would scoop up food and put it in a bowl. These places. There's over 80 of them all over Pompeii. I've got a few to show you. The countertop would have the places you could drop your big terracotta jars and vessels right into the stone with granite, or these are called dola. And in 2020, they excavated one. Archaeologists found bones of duck, pig, goat, fish, and even land snails. I don't know where the peacocks were, because I know the Romans like their peacocks too. But it's not fast food. This is not just like an option. This is the heartbeat of the working class. This is how the neighborhoods were fed, because most people are not like the Vettii in these wealthy homes with kitchens, with places to cook food. Everyone needed their thermopolium to get a tasty meal. After the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70, thousands of Jewish captives were shipped to Italy as slaves, part of the celebration that Titus put on in Rome to celebrate the victory. And we have proof here in Pompeii. Jewish names like Maria, Martha, and a wine merchant have been traced back. And the evidence that kosher fish sauce, what Roman lesson would be complete without mentioning garum, the fish sauce. Check your pantry. Do you have some condiment that's like fish sauce? Worcestershire sauce has a bit of anchovy in it. Kosher versions of this were kept in this area, in Pompeii, because of the dietary laws of the Jews. This graffiti says Onesimus. On a tavern wall, it's scratched. The plain Greek name Onesimus is a slave name that simply means useful. But this is giving us the evidence that monotheistic Jewish slaves, early Christians, could be a part of the culture here at Pompeii, a bit of the cultural collision that they may experience with all of the pagan gods. I've been back to Pompeii since 1989, recently taking families, kids on school trips. Here's some footage as we enter this archaeological park and walking with our tour guide, Francesca. She's showing us the Gladiator school, which is fitting for Rome. Everyone knows gladiators, and the amphitheater is not far off. You see the layout, the city that we're about to explore. But here, picture the big open courtyard. Fancy columns all around. This is the training ground for gladiators to practice their performances. But behind us, the cells. Gladiators are slaves. These are the cells where they would sleep and eat and waited for their turn in the games. Inside the cells, we see our first Roman graffiti. Not the first one that was ever made, but graffiti is a big part of Roman lifestyle. This is their messaging system, their social media. Here's some gladiator graffiti. Scratched into the plaster of the barracks, a fighter named Salatus called himself the heartthrob of the girls. Others are tallying, keeping score, how many fights, how many wins they had as gladiators. They were quite popular. They were famous. These arena games, like let's head down to this amphitheater, which is not far away. It's at the southeast corner of Pompeii. It was built in 70 BC, which makes this amphitheater the oldest surviving stone amphitheater. Amphitheater, what is, a theater is half the semicircle, or one semicircle, and you put two of them together, that's a double theater. Amphitheater, and this is a really good one. It's older than the Colosseum. The Flavian Amphitheater in the year 79 is just about to open, just getting finished up. This one has been around for a long time, and 20,000 people could pack in here, almost. And the seating system in these amphitheaters shows you, lifestyles. The magistrates and the rich can sit down front. The common people would sit in the middle, women and poorest people sitting way up at the top. Your seat was your status. Famous year 59, something very ugly happened at this site. A blood sport brawl broke out between the people of Pompeii and the neighboring town of Nuceria. Stone throwing turns into sword fighting. People actually died at this game in the year 59. Emperor Nero bans Pompeii from holding games for the next 10 years. Total ban. So the Romans love order. They love law and order. They love beautiful things. They like the excitement of the games, of the way the government would keep the mob under control, giving them these performances. If we go way out to look at the Bay of Naples, we've got 11 to 15,000 people in just this one area. So Pompeii is just one of many important places in cities. There's 170 acres in the city of Pompeii. It's not a major city. It's a medium city. The region is called Campania. Campania is 150 miles south of Rome. It's 2 hours in the bus or the trains. Strange to think that the city would already be hundreds of years old at our snapshot here in the year 79, because it was founded back in the 6th or 7th centuries BC by the Samnites. The Greek colonies are close by. Neapolis and Cumae Neapolis is Naples. That's a major port, and that's Greek. And so this is Magna Graecia. The lifestyles of the Romans is a blend of the Greeks. That's what makes it classical. The late 1st century, by the year 79, Pompeii has had a lot of success. But maybe you've already noticed it's actually 6 miles, this green, beautiful mountain, Mount Vesuvius in the background. If you were there in 79, you might not realize that that's a volcano. So hold that thought. We're going to talk about that volcano in this lesson. Back to the streets. Very well engineered Roman roads. On this grid system, you can tell this is a well-planned city. The cobblestones are volcanic basalt. What you should notice here are the ruts. Do you see the deep ruts worn into that solid stone by cartwheels over all the decades of use, centuries of use? And because the streets doubled as open drains, these engineers gave us raised stepping stones so you wouldn't have to get your feet wet with the nasty sewage. But we've mentioned aqueducts before. The Aqua Augusta, bringing fresh water down from the mountains and into the fountains. These fountains are not just decorative. They are how even poor families would have access to clean flowing water. It's when the Romans fall, when Roman Empire comes undone, we're not going to see this level of water access until the 20th century, pretty much. Pompeii is so wealthy because it's a port city. So you can see from this map where the ancient coastline used to be, and now as we're panning across the whole city layout, you can tell that road, that little highway, is kind of where the ancient coastline was. and all of that land that's been added. It's because of the volcano. We're getting to the volcano soon, but you got rich because you're probably involved in trade. You're a merchant. Maybe you want to pick up some crafts, some special things. Let's go over to Ephesus. As we're hopping on a ship and sailing to another port city, Ephesus, we're going to cruise past the prison island of Patmos. I've been to Patmos. Here's our group. We are at the top of the hill. This is where the Apostle John was in prison. John is exiled here, and he's writing letters back to 7 cities. One is Ephesus, where we're headed. And these letters reference the cultural collision that's growing. So one of those, Thyatira is a manufacturing hub, and guilds. So trade guilds would represent the weavers, the cloth dyers, bronze smiths. But a guild back in ancient times was also religious. It was pagan. So the guild, to represent their craft, maybe they have prices and rules, standards. The guild would also have a pagan god. They would throw banquets dedicated to the pagan gods. They would sacrifice meat and grill it. Meat sacrificed to idols is really a barbecue. And it's in celebration or in worship of that god. And then they would go and sell the leftover meat at the food shops that we've already looked at. But also part of these banquets oftentimes would involve prostitutes, part of the practice of certain gods and practices of these pagan idols. So, where we're going, follow the logic. If you're not going to participate in that type of pagan worship, you will not be in this guild. Here is the difficult moral question. The moral question: what does it mean to stay safe? What does it mean to stay true? So let's head over to Pergamum on our way to Ephesus. Pergamum was once the capital of the province of Asia. Ephesus is now. But John had been there. John is writing a letter to Pergamum. He says this is the place where Satan has his throne. Well, Berlin has Satan's throne now because German archaeologists moved it. You can see it in the Berlin Museum, but we can see where it stood, where it was. It's an impressive site, 1,000 feet off the ground, kind of a fortress hill with an Asclepion, with a theater. It's really a cool place to visit. But to early Christians, John is writing to them. This throne of Satan, there was a giant altar for Zeus where meat would be sacrificed to the idols on this whole complex that you see. Another problem being that the Roman governor is running his office out of here, and the Ius Gladii. If you're coming here from Lesson 60, you knew Pontius Pilate had to put down an uprising in Jerusalem once and use the right of the sword to do it. Legal power even includes execution, crucifixion. So in Pergamum, stakes are higher. Refusing to burn a pinch of incense. If you do that, there was a man, Antipas. Antipas was mentioned as a martyr, as a Christian martyr, because he didn't burn the incense. He chose staying true. So we feel the weight, the pressure. Little movement, this early Christian church, monotheism, is painting a target on your back, if that's you. And Ephesus was a major place in the early Christian church. The port city of Ephesus, most famous for Artemis. Not the same Artemis as this rocket, right? the great Artemis of the Ephesians is different than the Artemis of the Greeks. Artemis of the Ephesians, this is, come with me as we can see the layout of the city, like this wide marble street that's running through the heart of town, this main crossroads. And there's kind of the really iconic facade, this famous Library of Celsus. The ancient world was not there at the time of 79. This lesson is AD 79, but it's the most memorable thing people take away. Maybe. It's 2 full stories of carved marble columns. You can see the beauty of it. 12,000 scrolls, a capital city. People would come on ships. Remember in Alexandria, the Cleopatra would take your scroll and give you a copy back. The information was like gold. The marble, the money, the learning. It's a cosmopolitan city like Pompeii, but Ephesus is much bigger. Ephesus was one of the largest, richest cities in the entire empire, one of the top 5. And the crown jewel, the Temple of Artemis, this is one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. People would sail from all over just to come and buy special souvenirs for Artemis of the Ephesians. We know this especially because of the story of Demetrius. Demetrius was a silversmith. He got rich selling these silver shrines. I couldn't find the silver, these alabaster, but this is the goddess Artemis of the Ephesians. Different than the Artemis of the Greeks. This one is more about fertility. This one is going to cause a bigger cultural clash. So travelers, people sailing, Ephesus is a port city. It's a big deal to come and visit Artemis. Now, to be clear, this Artemis of the Ephesians is very different than Artemis of the Greeks, Diana of the Romans. So the rocket mission is the Greek, and the Roman is the Greek one. She's the daughter of Zeus and Leto, the twin sister of Apollo. But the Christian church is strong here in Ephesus. John was here. Paul's visiting here. Mary, the mother of Jesus, was living here. Christian message, the preaching against these idols, because they're saying these idols are nothing. And if people stop believing that Artemis of the Ephesians is really any big deal, they're going to stop buying silver statues from Demetrius. And Demetrius started a riot, got the mob on his side. The mob in this scene, the mob grabs Paul's companions. The apostle Paul had come through. Paul lived here for 2.5 years. But at this point, dragging him through the streets into this great theater, into where thousands of people would be on Mount Pion. 25,000 people could fit into this place. And they were furious because this is their culture. This is their livelihood. And visiting Ephesus for the purpose of worshiping Artemis involved prostitution again. So this mob starts a chant. Great is Artemis of the Ephesians. Again and again for hours, they're chanting in this riot. 2 solid hours, 25,000 people shouting, great is Artemis of the Ephesians, over and over and over again. So what is the cultural collision? What is the threat? The believers who believe in one true God and not idol. Idol worship wasn't only religion. It's big business. It's civic pride. It's the city's identity. To reject the gods is rejecting the economy, the livelihood. It's going to be a rough road. We have the archaeology of Ephesus. We have the written records, the letters in the Bible. But back where we started, if we were to sail back and let's say we bring Pliny the Elder with us, we're going to have quite a shock. Nature stops the clock, frozen in time, because just a few miles from Pompeii, we saw Mount Vesuvius, and people didn't realize that that is an active volcano that ripped open sometime, between August and October of the year 79. Pliny the Younger, sorry, did I say elder? Pliny the Younger was the one who watched this from the bay. He wrote it all down in a letter to the historian Tacitus, or Tacitus. He describes the cloud rising up like a giant umbrella pine. First came the rain of pumice, roofs collapsing under the weight, and then came the surges, avalanches of superheated ash and gas. It was racing down the mountain at a hurricane speed. Now, so fast did the gas and everything come in, it froze people in time, right? As archaeologists have uncovered this entire site for the past 150 years, they would pour plaster into cavities, and those plasters were the molds of the people and the positions. When the gas hit them so fast, they were suffocating. There was no oxygen. And left behind, let's check out the bakery of Modestus. And maybe this painting, it's a fresco of he's wearing a white robe, so he's a magistrate. He's either giving out bread for free or he's selling it, as a merchant getting wealthy. We can see what one of his loaves of bread would have looked like, because 81 loaves of sourdough bread were left inside this oven. And they're round, they're scored in 8 wedges because a family can break bread without a knife. It happened quick. On the Pompeii side, everything was buried in ash. On the Herculaneum side, Herculaneum received more of the lava flow. They've got some fascinating artifacts there. It's a really wealthy resort town, Herculaneum. So again, we can see wealthy lifestyles of regular Romans, and Pompeii having more of the lower class, more of a broad mix of regular Romans. That ash sealed Pompeii in the airless blanket, preserving these rich frescoes, the mosaics. Do you agree that we are just like the Romans? In the short lesson, we can't go as far. I mean, Pompeii is so fascinating and you could spend days there. I commented on that in 2.5 hours we're rushed. You can see kind of the highlights, but I mentioned I need to go back there for days, and that's it's encouraging that they're still discovering some new and interesting things. Rome could make life more comfortable and opulent than any civilization before. But the comfort, what's it built on? They've put down their enemies like Jerusalem. They're clashing with the monotheists. They've got slavery as a major industry, blood sports down the road at the Gladiator games, idol worship at every single level. And having a sense of wonder and a love for doing this is how you can become a classical scholar. I want to make you a classical scholar with the classical approach. It's so important to guide you in truth. And one last voice, very interesting graffiti that only recently had been discovered in the ruins of a dining room. Someone had scratched 2 words into the plaster in charcoal: Sodom, Gomorrah, Sodoma, Gomorrah, Sodom and Gomorrah. And that's really a biblical reference. We don't know if it was a Jewish reference or a Christian reference. Fleeing the raining fire, somebody stopped, rendered a verdict, said, this is what happened to Sodom and Gomorrah. And this is what's happening to the Roman Magnificent Empire. The city, it was comfortable. The city had moral questions that we may look back at and try to learn from. Pompeii and Ephesus gave us a very local view at the culture. But there's counter-cultural collision happening. And as we get back to Imperial Rome and see the power, we know it will be rough. Different emperors will make it especially rough for the early church, while still expanding the wealth and power of Rome. Thank you for taking the time to learn something that matters in all of history. And that includes your journey, because kingdoms rise and fall, power fades, but virtue endures.